20 states are ready to reopen. Does hydroxychloroquine work? A new study out that casts some doubts. We'll get into the latest with that. Plus, a mother arrested for letting her kids play in a park. The UN is warning that famines are coming around the globe. What to do about the second wave of infection that could happen. And the war on election safeguards. Guess who's waging it? The left. That and more coming up.
20 states representing 40% of the U.S. population have announced that they are making plans and preparations to safely restart their economies in the very near future. So that's 20 states. It's about 40% of our country. They're moving along pretty quickly. 3 announced today, as you know. And they're going to be doing it safely. They're going to be doing it with tremendous passion. They want to get back to work. The country wants to get back to work.
Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everyone. The president expressing the sentiment that so many of us have that we do want the country to get back to work. We all want to be able to get back to work to varying degrees. We're able to continue or not, but we need America to be doing what we need to do once again. We have given weeks and weeks of our lives to this lockdown effort, a lockdown effort that still has, I would say, questionable data to support that the full lockdown was necessary. I'm not going to say it was wrong. I'm just saying it's questionable. And in some places, if you look at it state by state, you see what part of the issue is that if you take it all as a national lockdown, yes or no, well, then you're going to edge closer toward, well, I guess we have to be more cautious and go with a national lockdown. If you do this state by state, there are some states that quite clearly did not need to have a cessation of business like other states did. That's just, at this point, I don't know how you can justify telling tens of millions of people in certain states that because there have been a few thousand infections that are established, and we got to talk more about the serology testing situation today, but a few thousand tests or 5,000, 10,000, you're going to shut down all business. And social distancing, the mitigation measures that are in place, they seem to be working. So that's been positive. But we can continue those. We can continue those even as we try to engage in more normal lives. The debate here is still not go back to full on normal. No one thinks that we're going to be able to flip the switch and everything's going to be the way that it was before all of this happened. But we're never going to get there if we wait for the risk to be zero. And I think that's the change in consciousness that's happened at this point. I think that's where people have finally started to see a shift in their thinking. Some of us have been worried about this all along. I mean, I've been concerned about this, trying to raise those concerns here on the show. And I just also think that the first person who yells across my at least 6-foot air barrier of virus safety to put on a mask, or else they're going to call Mayor de Blasio's snitch line, even though I'd be walking entirely alone, except for Tallulah, in open air on a generally empty street in NYC. They are going to find me very disagreeable to that little dictatorial impulse. They're going to find that I do not like that and do not respond well to it. And I know that there is now a statewide order in effect, but some of these statewide orders are of dubious constitutionality and legality. We have been accepting them, but if we chose to challenge them, the state would have a very hard time proving some of this is, in fact, within its remit in court. But they're doing it anyway. They're doing it anyway. And that's concerning. For the past month, if you brought up any concerns about creeping state tyranny, as I have, you've been told to shut up. You've been told that you want grandma to die, and you've been told to stay inside, peasant. Nancy Pelosi has Jenny's ice cream to eat in front of her $25,000 Viking fridge. Well stocked. By the servants, I would note. Nancy Pelosi, guarantee you, she has, quote, they don't call them servants anymore. They call them staff. I did not grow up rich, but I grew up among, in close proximity to the rich here in New York City. And I know some of the proper terminology for the highfalutin folks. It's not, you don't call them servants, you call them staff. Even if you make them wear one of those old-time butler or maid uniforms. Trust me, Nancy Pelosi's got a bunch of people maintaining the castle for her while she's telling the rest of us to stay locked indoors. But for the past month, if you brought any of this up, that you were treated terribly. And now we have mothers being dragged away in front of their children for the crime of getting fresh air in a playground, and jogging on a beach is treated like a public menace. Many of us have been warning all along here about just what is going to happen the moment the government has too much power, the moment that we start to say the Bill of Rights no longer counts. You can tell us whether we have freedom of assembly. You can tell us whether we have freedom of speech, what we're allowed to say. This is very troubling. You know, one of the areas of the digital era, the digital revolution in which we live, that I have always found to be a remarkable step forward, true progress. I feel like progressives have ruined the word progress for many of us, but it is still a good word, still got usage. But one area of true progress has been the notion of the major social media platforms as free speech havens. Now, we've all found out the hard way that's not really true, but how not true is it? YouTube CEO Susan Woj. Producer Mark, how do we, I mean, this is a Polish one. I don't know if you know Polish better than me. Wojcicki?
Sure, why not?
Wojcicki. I'll go, or Wojcicki? That's a tough one. Anyway, the CEO of YouTube, and pardon me, I should know her name, but, you know, we're doing a show here, and I didn't look this one up beforehand, so that's on me. But CEO Susan, we'll call her, had this to say about what will be removed. Now, we're all trying to find out more facts, have a conversation. Oh, big study on hydroxychloroquine's come out, and people are celebrating. Oh, more people are going to die now because we don't have a drug that can actually help keep them alive. The journalists are all going, see? And they're secretly going, yay, because they're blaming it on Trump, like psychopaths. I actually reached out and sent the study to, and I've had a conversation with, an infectious disease specialist whom I know quite well. And I have a whole bunch of data from a professional, or analysis, I should say, from a professional based on that data that I will share with you today that you will not see from the mainstream media. But YouTube is supposed to be a place where you can share your thoughts on matters of public policy, right? This is not hate speech. This is not, threatening anybody or causing violence or instigation of violence or anything like that. This is open public discussion. What should we do about the pandemic? YouTube CEO Susan had this to say about what they'll pull down from that site. Play 2.
But then we also talk about removing information that is problematic. You know, of course, anything that is medically unsubstantiated. So people saying like, take vitamin C, take turmeric, like those are all will cure you. Those are the examples of things that would be a violation of our policy. Anything that would go against World Health Organization recommendations would be a violation of our policy. And so remove is another really important part of our policy.
Remove. That's a nice way of saying censorship. This is YouTube engaging in censorship on behalf of the WHO. The WHO? Who? What? Archimedes? No, the World Health Organization. That's the same organization that we know told the world in the middle of January, oh, it turns out they didn't think there was any evidence of human-to-human transmission of this virus that has now largely shut down the world. The organization that has been doing China's bidding and that has been praising China in recent weeks for its response to this crisis. Yes, that organization. If you disagree with them, or if you tell people to what? Take more vitamin C? Or what goes against WHO recommendations, I would wonder. Oh, wearing a mask? If you said you need to wear a mask a month ago, that would have been against the WHO mandate, it seems. And if you now don't wear a mask, you're against the mandate. The mandate keeps changing. For those who actually understand history, the idea that consensus around ideas of medicine and around science, consensus matters, is a very dangerous one. The facts matter. Data matters. Consensus is often political. Consensus means nothing. If you're curious, you could go back and read about how there were outbreaks of cholera in Great Britain, stretching into the middle of the 19th century. And at that point in time, London, you're talking about 1860s, 1870s, 1880s. London is really the intellectual and scientific center of the world. I mean, London was considered a more sophisticated in those regards than anywhere else, perhaps even including the United States. And the overwhelming majority of doctors in London would have told you in the 1870s and the 1880s that the reason you would have gotten cholera, which is a very dangerous bacteria that's waterborne, and it actually comes from human waste. That's how it is transferred. So human waste gets into the water and it spreads very, very rapidly. And your fatality rate, if you get it within 24 hours, is about 40%. So it is a vicious disease and kills people very quickly. The theory was called the miasma theory, or miasmatic theory. And it was that there was a noxious form of bad air that gave you cholera. Now, you might say, Buck, why are you bringing this up? Because that was the expert consensus in the most advanced and sophisticated medical community in the world at the time. Now, that's not to say that there's no such thing as science. If I have a bad, strep throat, I'm taking antibiotics, right? I'm not saying that science isn't science. I'm merely saying that was their theory. They didn't have proof, but they tried to bludgeon other people with consensus. And consensus is not science. So for right now to hear people say, oh, well, whatever the World Health Organization says, does the World Health Organization get to weigh in on whether the virus came from a lab or came from the wet market in Wuhan? Are you allowed to go against that? I want to know where the censorship stops and starts with what the consensus on these issues may be. We have petty totalitarianism rising in states across the country where we just shouldn't see it. No one should be arresting a mom for wanting to be out in the air with their child. It's just stupid. We all know that. It's wrong. And we should expect that any government official would know that. We're seeing that happen, and we're also seeing the shutdown of free and open discourse about an area where the models have been wrong, the experts have been wrong. We did not see this coming. They do not know how to treat this. They do not know how to cure this, but they want everyone to just shut up and stay inside. I think that's a big problem, my friends. I think we need to keep pushing for real answers. This does not mean we have an excuse to be reckless and disregard facts and data. It means let's really look at the facts and data. And what people are going to just chime in with, oh, the experts said, the consensus is, prove it to me. Do not try to silence me by waving a fancy degree that someone else or some other group of people have when they won't be the ones making the argument about why I can't take a walk in a park without a mask on my face.
We will continue to see mortality and deaths among our American citizens, particularly in the cities as they begin to move past peak, because deaths will lag. And so we really need to continue to unite and really support our healthcare providers who are still on the front lines. They have been on the front lines now for weeks and weeks and weeks. And so no matter what city they have been in, they have not seen the relief that we've been able to talk about at the light at the end of the tunnel because of the delay in hospitalizations and deaths. So to our healthcare providers, to our respiratory therapists, and to everyone in the labs, thank you for the work that you're doing to protect Americans and give us one of the lowest mortality rates in the entire world.
A lot of important things said there, and I wanted to make sure that I also always balance out. My dispute is with the policy medical experts and the way they're influencing national policy, dictating really national policy outside of their purview of expertise, and it is inherently, therefore, both an economic and political matter. That's a separate issue from the doctors, nurses, and everyone who are just trying to keep alive our friends, families, relatives, everybody out there right now who's dealing with this. So I always like to make sure that we establish that separation. You know, it is a brave thing to show up every day now as a nurse, as a doctor, as an EMT, and expose yourself to people who have high high levels of this virus, a virus we still really don't understand very well, and have a lot that we have to learn about. I will talk about that hydroxychloroquine study. I have some really worthwhile insights from a true expert for you on that. But I also just wanted to note that how often do you hear that America has the lowest, America having the lowest fatality rate from everything that we can see so far is largely, we can't really establish a specific percentage, but largely a function of those healthcare workers. I do not think it is a function of our policy, because other countries had lockdown policies too. I mean, you'll never really be able to see true numbers on this, but I would note that there are other ways, other factors that you'd have to look at here. But our doctors are doing really, really good work with what they have. They have a very limited toolkit, which is tragic. The ventilators, we've heard so much about ventilators. Your chance of coming off a ventilator if you go on, at least by all New York State data, and we've had the most cases, is 1 in 5. It's disconcerting. Now, 1 in 5 isn't 1%, but it's obviously not as high as we would want it to be. We need more weapons. We need more tools for our first responders. Also, I mentioned to you the miasma theory actually comes from the ancient Greek word for pollution, which I think is just an interesting, we have these terms, these medical terms that we still use today. I've mentioned to you before that influenza comes from Italian sailors in, I believe, the 14th century, talking about how they thought that the disease was the influence of the stars. That's where influenza comes from. Okay, this is the term that we still use to this day. Malaria is a term from medieval Italian that means malaria, bad air, which people also thought it was the bad air that made you sick. They didn't realize that it was a parasite that was transmitted through the bite of an infected mosquito, and that human beings were the hosts, and that the mosquitoes were the reservoir for this. So there's a lot that we still have to learn, a lot that we have to get into this fight. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time on, because this has become so political, and I'm seeing already liberals who are saying that hydroxychloroquine, because this one study came out of France, and look, the study's results are not good for those who want a better weapon against the disease, which I would think everybody would be in favor of, but there's some people that can't get out of their way on this one. But it's not definitive, and it's not as clear as they say. And I've told you when there have been encouraging results about hydroxychloroquine that are anecdotal. Well, I'm going to tell you about what aspects of this study that we've seen are not definitive and do require more study, more scientific rigor, and it's too soon to tell is the real answer about hydroxychloroquine. But I want to tell you why, because I don't think a lot of people are going to get this one right.
The hydroxychloroquine, I'm wondering if you're concerned, this VA study showed that actually more people died that used the drug that didn't, and I'm wondering if Governor Cuomo brought you back any results.
No, we didn't discuss it, and I don't know of the report. Obviously, there have been some very good reports, and perhaps this one's not a good report, but we'll be looking at it. We'll have a comment on it.
A panel of experts at the NIH is actually now recommending against the use of hydroxychloroquine in combination with Z-Pak, which is something you've
we'll
been
take
recommending.
A look at that. I'm always willing to take a look.
Okay. Notice how all along here we have been told that this is somehow political, that the president trying in some way to encourage people by pointing out that there's some good information about a drug that, remember, this is not drinking some random substance in the hopes that it's a miracle cure. This is a decades-long approved by the FDA drug that is really helpful for people with lupus, with rheumatoid arthritis, and who don't want to get malaria, which I had to work with a guy once who had malaria, like who had a relapse of malaria. It can actually relapse too. I would note it's the parasite can come back. It's a terrible, as it was explained to me when I was going over to Africa for the first time on assignment by the government, to a place where malaria was everywhere. Really bad malaria was everywhere I was going to be. But I was told whatever the drug is, you got to take it because you really don't want malaria. Okay, it's a nasty, nasty disease. I remember working with a guy who had the relapse, and he was just, he's in really bad shape. So we know that it works for other things. We know that it's safe enough to take that. Remember, there's always a balance. When you take Tylenol, and by the way, if you go speak to certain doctors who are, neurologists, I mean, they'll tell you people that take a lot of Tylenol for headaches, very hard on your stomach. You really, Tylenol can mess you up. And by the way, not just Tylenol, any of these NSAIDs that you take out there, it's hard on your system. It's hard on your liver. You really don't want to be a heavy drinker and use those things. And this is all on the label, right? I'm not telling you anything that you don't know if you've ever read the label of an ibuprofen or Tylenol or any of the rest of it. Point here is that there's a trade-off in the drugs. And with this study on hydroxychloroquine, we're being told, well, let me tell you what it actually says. A malaria drug widely touted by President Donald Trump, this is for treating the new coronavirus, showed no benefit in a large analysis of its use in U.S. veterans' hospitals. There were more deaths among those given hydroxychloroquine versus standard care, researchers reported. The nationwide study was not a rigorous experiment, but with 368 patients, it's the largest look so far of hydroxychloroquine with or without the antibiotic azithromycin for COVID-19, which has killed more than 171,000 people as of Tuesday. Okay, this is all in Politico, right? That's a quote from this Politico article. The study was posted, so is this. The study was posted online for researchers and has been submitted to the New England Journal of Medicine, but has not been reviewed by other scientists. Grants from the National Institutes of Health and the University of Virginia paid for the work. Okay. Friends, this sounds like, game over for hydroxychloroquine. And I will just note, it is appalling that there are people that seem to be eager to report this story and have a whole, told you, Trump was sharing this, Trump's so bad. This is about giving people who are on death's door in a hospital with a very debilitating, painful, and lethal disease, giving them a chance to beat it. I give you my word on my word of honor. If Chuck Schumer was out there saying, "Hey guys, I saw this drug study and it looks pretty good for COVID patients if they take the following. Let's hope it's true," which is all Trump has said. Trump didn't say it works. He's saying, "Let's hope." He's saying, "I've seen some things. Let's hope." I promise you, I'd say I hope Chuck Schumer is right and that this study does prove. I mean, we all want the same thing here. We should want the same thing here, which is more weapons for our healthcare providers to fight the invisible enemy of this virus and protect more people, protect more lives, save more people. But there's an obvious, a visible glee with which some in the media report on this, and you do end up asking yourself, how deranged have they really become when, even under these circumstances, the most important thing to them is that Trump looks bad. There's no disappointment at this drug not necessarily working the way that we were hoping. No one said it was a cure. I should say no one in the Trump administration said it was a cure. I don't know what everybody says, but the Trump administration was not misrepresenting this at all. But it's also not over, friends. You'll see that whenever a study comes out, like serology tests, all of a sudden everyone becomes an expert in scientific experimentation. All of a sudden, they'll be said, "Oh, there's no control group. Oh, there's no, there's nothing that you can do to look at this that makes it prove anything," right? I mean, they tear apart studies that, remember, beating the virus has been conflated in a lot of journos and Democrats' minds with good for Trump, therefore, a little conflicted about some aspects of this. Sure, they would say they want to save every life. Of course, they would say that. But yet, whenever there's a story that could promote the ability of the administration to handle this better, or that it's not perhaps going to be as bad as we had been told, there's this partisan divide in the way that people view this. And I find that very troubling. But this study that now, and I saw people, there were people that were kind of spiking the football. See, hydroxychloroquine doesn't work the way that you were told it does. Well, that's really bad news for humanity. Okay, we want drugs that are going to save people here. We want things that are going to work, but it's also not true. This is just yet another data point among many, and we don't remember what I said. It's not about consensus. It's about science. It's about facts. It's about what is true, what is provable, what can be replicated as a result. And here is what a friend of mine, and really on all these issues, a kind of mentor. I said, look, you got to break this study down for me. What are we? I said, is this game over for hydroxychloroquine? And I can tell you, this is somebody who I've entrusted my health and my life to in the past on some serious stuff. This is a guy who really knows his stuff, and he's very, very highly regarded. But he lives a private life as an MD, and I'm not. I told him I just would use his analysis. I'm not gonna. But he's an infectious disease specialist. He said, this is his response. You know, the media, Politico, everyone's, NPR, the study shows hydroxychloroquine is garbage, doesn't work for this. The dangerous drug. In fact, more people died who took hydroxychloroquine. Here's what he says, quote, this is probably the worst of study designs. It is retrospective analysis with no stated methods as to how patients were assigned one of the three treatment arms. In addition, the three groups were not entirely comparable, and all were sick enough to be hospitalized. A key indicator of prognosis, fibrin degradation products, was not even measured. So, although it may be proven true in subsequent prospective trials, we should also understand that proponents of the use of hydroxychloroquine in various combinations with other drugs all suggest that the drug is most effective when used early, well before patients qualify for hospitalization. This is similar to the way we use oseltamivir. This is how you know this came from an expert, because I don't even know how to pronounce this stuff. Oseltamivir or baloxavir for influenza. Unless started within 72 hours of onset of viral symptoms, these effective, proven, and licensed drugs have little or no demonstrable effect on the course of influenza. However, we still routinely will use them in advanced, late, beyond 72 hours influenza patients who are sick enough to be admitted to the hospital. It will be interesting to see if this article is even accepted by a reputable journal, meaning the study is even accepted by a reputable journal. Oh, wait a second. You mean there's a lot more layers here? There's a lot more research and work that needs to be done? I've been telling you this for weeks now. The real experts who are looking at this and he's somebody his hospital is treating large number of COVID patients. He's looking at all the data from those trials. I have another friend who's a doctor out in Brooklyn. He's treating large numbers of COVID patients and looking at, and then they were using hydroxychloroquine on them. And it seemed like it works for some people, doesn't work for others. Well, it's not random. There's some reason why it would work for some and not others, and we'd have to get to the bottom of that. But notice how the politics drives the narrative, not the science. We already know. So you see what he's explaining here is that, first of all, this study there's a lot of holes, there's a lot of weakness in the study, but we already know that there are the most effective antivirals we use for influenza. Remember, 14th century Italians, influenza, influence of the stars. We already know that you have to take it early on, or else the viral replication gets to the point where you can't really, the horse has already left the barn, right? You gotta get to it within a certain time frame, or else. And this is even true of Tamiflu, which I'm assuming maybe that's what oseltamivir. That's probably what it is, actually. Now that I think about it, I'm just guessing. That might not, that's not medical advice. But you have to take these drugs early on, or else they have no effect. That's true of so why would that be so strange with hydroxychloroquine? Because people were, the regulators were a little bit gun shy about giving hydroxychloroquine to people. You know what they've done? They've said it's only going to people in hospitals. Who shows up at hospitals now with COVID-19? That small but substantial percentage of people that have extreme symptoms. So you're already looking at people who have had a lot of virus replication inside of them and are in bad shape. It may be too late for hydroxychloroquine to switch that off. The primary threat to individuals once they get to that phase is at least the primary threat that we're seeing that causes fatality. We know the lungs shut down and they don't function, but why? It's ARDS. It's this inflammatory syndrome in the lungs that comes from something called a cytokine storm. Well, if you already have enough virus in your system that you've arrived at the cytokine storm phase, even if you're starting to fight back on that virus replication, the inflammatory and immune response in your lungs may be too much, and you might die anyway. Now, this is theorizing, but it's theorizing, and these are theories I'm borrowing from actual MDs and people that work in infectious disease. Not, no offense, I love dermatologists; they do great work too. But I'm talking about people that look at infectious disease. No, they do infectious disease too in a way, but you see what I'm saying. People that this is their realm of expertise. So I remember, I think wasn't there a Seinfeld episode where Jerry said something about dermatologists, and then they're like, "Are dermatologists?" And then I think George or somebody's like, "Yeah, Jerry, skin cancer," and he goes, "Oh."
No, he was dating a dermatologist, and she claimed to save lives, and he said she doesn't save lives, and he called her out for it.
That's right.
And then she was treating skin cancer.
Thank you. That's right. Yes. So I know dermatologists, legit MDs that do very, very important stuff. I just mean that this is within the doctors I'm talking about. This is within their specialty of dealing with infectious disease. Somebody on social media actually called out Alex Berenson, who we had on the show, who's one of the few people willing to ask questions about the dominant narrative about COVID-19 and all of this. And someone was yelling at him on Twitter, your wife is not even a physician. She's a psychiatrist. Psychiatrists go to medical school, have an MD, and are in fact physicians. Alex, I think, appreciated on Twitter. I explained this to some of the angry masses who people really don't want to believe what he's telling them, which is just, hey, look at the numbers. It's bad. It's not as bad as they're saying. That's the message that gets you in trouble these days. Things are bad. We all know that. The economy is in really bad shape, and we're losing a lot of people from this virus, and things are bad. But the virus itself is not as bad as they told you it would be. And that's the message that gets you in so much trouble right now. It's also why when you bring up the possibility of a therapy that is useful in fighting against this disease, especially if it's something that the president, and not just the president, a lot of people have talked about hydroxychloroquine. Doctors have been going on TV talking about hydroxychloroquine. Oh, but Tom Hanks' wife says that it gave her really bad side effects. Yeah, there are side effects. We've always known that about the drug. People are not aligned here with what is righteous and what is good. They're not turning toward the light on this issue because the politics of the moment have blinded them. The answer about hydroxychloroquine is we don't have the answer. But people that are trying to act like we do and shut this whole thing down, I know there's a change in the CDC guidance about it. Well, that's because they don't know. But we shall see, my friends. It is too early to tell. That's a different thing from we know and Trump was wrong, which is bizarre on a whole bunch of levels.
Corona is really saying to Americans is, hey, wait a minute, folks. It's important to listen to the experts. It's important to listen to scientists. It's important to find a baseline of truth and make the choices on it. So coronavirus may be America and the world's great wake-up call with respect to the challenge of climate, because this is coming at us. If you think pandemics are bad today, wait till you have the warming at a greater level than it is now, and we're headed there. Every scientific report and judgment shows that we are heading into amazing negative impacts. The feedback loops on the Earth are just horrendous right now. I'm not going to go through them all, but so that's the meaning of the deaths thus far. And yesterday was the highest number of deaths, and still this president is avoiding responsibility for testing.
Just all blather and talking points and nincompoopery from John Kerry. That's his expertise, nincompooperi. What the heck is he talking about? The lesson of COVID-19 is climate change and how much worse climate change is going to make these people that they have been brainwashed, and maybe perhaps their efforts to brainwash other people has seeped into their own brains and they really believe their own BS now. Maybe that's where this is. Maybe this is the reality of their own mindset. We're in the middle of this pandemic, and you want to tell us that we should be worried about climate change? That's all based on models. He wants to talk about listen to experts. Climate change is all about models. Models have been wrong for climate change consistently now for really as long as I've been alive. The experts on climate change tend to usually be people who are like lawyers who work for big international NGOs who are leveraging some scientific consensus when the real consensus doesn't exist. But the tyranny that you're feeling right now around this issue, they will use this on climate change in the future. Mark my words.